I've always been fascinated with farewell addresses. Have you? They're like a valedictorian saying goodbye to his school and his classmates. I'm going to tell you about three farewell addresses during this time. They're spoken by three individuals. I think you know them all. One for many of you that are older in this group. It's probably your contemporary. Each address has an amazing message to tell. Full of deep feeling, full of compassion, certainly full of understanding. All three of these individuals who are saying farewell, they died within a very short time after they delivered this message. I'm going to highlight it by telling you each of those individuals, and then I'm going to summarize their content. I'm going to try and draw some lasting thoughts and emotions to help us understand their meaning. The first farewell was delivered by someone probably most familiar to you. Come with me, Memphis, Tennessee. It's April the 3rd, 1968. The auditorium is a church, the Church of God. And the building is packed with sanitation workers from the city of Memphis. Now, these workers, they've been on strike, and they felt that the city hasn't given them a fair hurt, nor have they been honest with them in their as public servants. Martin Luther King, he's the Baptist preacher and the civil rights advocate from Atlanta. He's been invited to speak to them, and he's going to talk to them on the issue of unity, economic action, boycotts, nonviolent protests. And he's going to show some courage to these people, and he wants them to live up to the ideals of the American dream. And at the end of his speech, he hints of the possibility that he might meet an untimely death. King would emphasize that the best course of action for success was for a peaceful demonstration, nonviolence, that he said was the only guarantee for their demands. And if they did, they would be heard and they would probably get an answer. Martin Luther King, before this speech in Memphis, had been told that there were threats against his life. No one in that vast audience had a foreshadowing of his impending death. King reaffirmed that he was not afraid to die. Let me share his farewell address. Here's what he said. I don't know what will happen now. We've got some difficult days ahead. But it really doesn't matter to me now, because I've been to the mountaintop. And I don't mind. Like anybody, I would like to live a long life. Longevity has its place, but I'm not concerned about that now. I just want to do God's will. And he's allowed me to go to the mountain. And I've looked over. And I've seen the promised land. Now, I may not get there with you, but I want you to know tonight that we as a people, we will get to the promised land. So I'm happy tonight, and I'm not worried about anything. I'm not fearing any man. Mine eyes have seen the glory of the coming of the Lord. With those words, Martin Luther King, he waved goodbye to his audience, and then he sat down. The audience rose to their feet, and they gave him a 5-minute ovation. Everyone in that building, they knew what King was referring to. He was like a prophet, and he was speaking a prophet's language, spoken by Moses to the people of Israel in the book of Deuteronomy many years before, as he leads the children of Israel to the promised land out of Egypt. Before they reach that land, Moses is informed by God that he's not going to reach the land himself. He's only going to see it from a distance. Within that same month of April, 1967, an assassin by the name of James Earl Ray. He was deeply racist. He purchased a Remington rifle, .30-30 caliber, and he killed Martin Luther King on the balcony of a motel in Memphis. King's murder spread fast and furious to every newspaper in the United States and throughout the world. Looking back now, after all those years, King's farewell address has been honored as one of the greatest goodbyes ever spoken. I told you that I was going to share 3 farewell addresses in my lesson today. That was the first one. Now I'll tell you about the second one. I'm going to take you back 200 years from Martin Luther King's address. And I'm going to tell you this second one. I want you to come with me. Springfield, Illinois. The date is February the 11th, 1861. Abraham Lincoln is President-elect of the United States. He's going to give a farewell address to his close friends and neighbors. Lincoln is about to board a special presidential train heading back to Washington. He's going to reside in his new home. It's the White House, because he's president. At the Great Western Railroad station in Springfield, President Lincoln is going to speak these emotion-charged words before he boards that presidential car with his wife and his kids. These words are going to make headlines on the front pages of all the newspapers in the U.S. Here's the message that Lincoln delivered to all those gathered to hear him say his goodbye. My friends, no one, not in my situation, can appreciate my feelings that I have of sadness at this parting. To this place and the kindness of these people, I owe everything. Here I have lived a quarter of a century, and I've passed from a young to an old man. Here my children have been born, and one is buried. I now leave you, not knowing where or wherever I may return with a task before me greater than that which rests upon me like George Washington many years before. Without the assistance of God, whoever attended him, I cannot succeed. With that assistance, with me too, I cannot fall. Trusting in him, who can go with me and also remain with you, be everywhere for good. Let us confidently hope that all will yet be well. So to his care, commending you, as I hope in your prayers you commend me, I now bid you an affectionate farewell. From that train station in Springfield, Illinois, Abraham Lincoln never returned again alive. He was assassinated by Wilkes Booth in a theater in Washington, and his words in his farewell address still ring clear today. I now leave, not knowing where or wherever I may return. When Lincoln's body was resting in the rotunda in the nation's capital, Thousands of people came by just to witness the coffin of their president who had been slain. In the middle of that crowd was a young black mother, walking hand in hand with her little son. And when they got to the coffin, she held her son up and said to him, "Honey, take a look at that man. He died for you." I told you at the start of our lesson, we're going to have 3 famous farewells. Here's the last one. I've saved it to the last because it highlights the conclusion of our study in the book of James. James is now going to give you his farewell address. Remember, he was the first pastor of one of those in the early church. Here's his farewell comments in his 5th chapter. Verse 13, I'll begin. Prayer will heal you. Jesus put you on your feet again. If you have sinned, you're going to be forgiven, healed inside and out. Make your common practice the prayer of a person living right with his God. If you do, you'll find it something very powerful. Finally, my friends, if you know people who have wandered off from God's truth, don't write them off. Go after them. Get them back. And if you do, you'll have rescued precious lives from destruction. James made clear at the beginning of his letter, when he instructed his Christian friends in where to find wisdom. Do you remember what he said? If any of you lack wisdom, let him ask God, who gives to all men generously without holding back, and it will be given to him. That's how he started off in James 1, verse 5. He closes his letter by giving a link between wisdom and prayer. You'll receive no wisdom from above, says James, without humbly asking. James concludes his letter where he started. Praying for wisdom was the beginning note. Wisdom from praying was his closing note. Control the tongue was James' big concern. The tongue was a bit of a guide, like a guide to a horse. It was a bit. It was a rudder that steered the ship, and it was the fire that ignited the forest. James went on to say, with your tongue, you can bless the Lord, and with your tongue, you are made in the likeness of God. James 3, verse 9. You have power to heal the hurt, and prayer has wonderful spin-offs. Is anyone among you suffering? Let him pray. Is anyone among you cheerful? Well, let him sing praises. James 5:13. Shortly after these words were spoken, James was put to death. He became one of the first martyrs as Jesus' follower. The Union University in Tennessee, it evaluates their freshman class as to their academic strengths, and questions are raised to each one of these students. What do you think will become your major as you come and study with us? Is sports your direction? They had a great sports program. Do you think business will be your strength? What about teaching? Have you thought about medicine? What about research? Do you want to be an engineer? Markham. He was a timid freshman. He came from a small town. His marks in school, they're a bit above average. He was quite shy, but he was very polite. He was a great baseball shortstop. He had been looked over, and he arrived on campus with a sports scholarship in baseball. His classes started. The advisory council evaluated his strengths, and they looked at some of the tests that he had given. There was nothing outstanding. But by the middle of the year, of that first year, suddenly the light came on. It was almost as if he hit the sweet spot in his life. He just began to eat up his chemistry textbook. He loved chemistry. And then he took biology, the biology labs. He couldn't get enough of them. He could sleep there if he wanted. All of this caused him to race to the top of his class academically. He made the dean's list. By his fourth year, guess where he went for his major? Medicine. Markham, it was almost in his life made to become a doctor, a medical doctor. All his options, academically, were no longer needed. He went full mount right into that program, medicine. Every course and lab pointed to him becoming a physician. Markham graduated, completed his residency. Something I didn't tell you about this young man. Before he went in to the university, he was a Christian. He was a follower of our Lord. Constantly in his prayer, he used to ask the Lord, now, what do you want me to do? Here I am, I'm a freshman, I'm starting out, I've got all these courses. What do you want me to do? Give me a course that really hits me, that really makes it work. His university journey began like James. He encouraged his listeners, remember, Lord, show me the wisdom? God seemed to speak to Markham, saying, keep talking to me. What do you want me to give you? Well, God opened the door for him, and he led him in the path of righteousness, and he showed him where he wanted him to be placed. So he took him into medicine. I'll place you where I can use you. When Markham graduated from residency, he wanted to join Doctors Without Borders. Have you ever heard of them? He began in 1967 in Nigeria, Africa. Remember, Nigeria was a little colony of France. They had a humanitarian cry for doctors and nurses. The country was overraged with famine, civil war, and death. And they called out to France and they said, have you got any doctors or nurses that would come down and give us a hand because we're desperate? Well, the call went out, and suddenly some doctors left their practice. Down to Africa they went, and there they joined in, and they became the servants to heal that country. In that one time, going back to that little country in Africa, Doctors Without Borders was born. Today, all over the world, 70 countries have Doctors Now Without Borders. I've got friends that have left this country to go over there and become part of that program. The United Nations recognizes the group, and also in 1999, they received the Nobel Peace Prize for their efforts. Markham applied. He was accepted. He's now in service. Guess where he's serving? Gaza, in the Middle East, in the middle of a war zone. I don't think in the book of James, James could be more proud of this fellow Markham, who's doing exactly what God told him to do so long ago. Believe in prayer. God will heal you. He'll put you on your feet. He will show you the path to take. As I close, has God put you on your feet? Why don't you ask him? I want you to know that he won't write you off. That's my lesson today. 5 farewells. James Farewell is still with us. It's right here in the book. This is the end of my study in the book of James today. Next week, we're going to go on to a brand new area. I hope you'll come back and be part of it. Thanks for joining me today.